The WTA was not receiving any of the billions that were being offered. Instead of merely pursuing Alex Eala, brands were giving up on the entire tour. In terms of financial utility, a 19-year-old Filipino had outperformed a professional circuit developed over 50 years. Not through Grand Slam domination or ranking dominance, but through something far more perilous to the system: unchecked cultural allure. When the financial data started to come to light, the tennis community did more than merely raise eyebrows. Since there was no sponsorship story going on, it did not breathe. The balance of power shifted. A small corporate revolution disguised as a tennis skirt. Furthermore, its strategy was unknown to the WTA. Stay tuned to find out why the most significant match in women's tennis isn't happening on any court. Some athletes achieve success in their sport before receiving the recognition they merit. Muhammad Ali was the one. Serena Williams was the one. Regardless of the WTA institution's approval, Alex Eala is currently entirely revamping their marketing methods on a scale that covers business boardrooms from Manila to Manhattan. No coaching textbook could impart what Eala gave to the world of professional tennis. She received rigorous discipline as a child, trained at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Morocco, and was born in the Philippines. At the same time, billions of people in Southeast Asia, Europe, and America were moved by her narrative. It was a real multi-generational, cross-continental tale. Businesses noticed what marketing professionals secretly refer to as a tremendous cultural convergence brought forth by this combination long before the rankings caught up: the contagious personality, the elite European training ground, and the underdog region. By the time Eala was making headlines on the WTA Tour, her social media following had eclipsed that of several players with higher rankings. Her Instagram engagement figures weren't very high for a tennis star. They might be used by any athlete, wherever in the globe. Instead of relying solely on numbers, brands are measuring true audience engagement through genuine emotional connection from real communities. We are examining numbers that led their analysts to verify the information. Sports organizations, luxury watch producers, tech behemoths, and telecom firms with substantial clientele in Southeast Asia. They were not only inquisitive. They were competing fiercely behind closed doors. Exploratory conversations were giving way to substantial cash commitments. Crucially, WTA partner channels were not being used for these discussions. They were directly on their way to Eala's attorney. This is a very important distinction. The WTA uses a conventional structure for sports marketing: centralized sponsorships, official tour partnerships, and community-based revenue models. That strategy was perfect for many years. It was created for a different era, though, where a single athlete may receive more online attention than the entire organization supporting her. Eala represented all that the earlier model had overlooked: a talent whose distinct brand gravity was taking sponsors out of the tour's orbit. Not by dispute or conflict, but simply by showing up and interacting with people on a frequency that WTA's institutional voice was unable to match. In tennis circles, there were an increasing number of murmurs. Agents representing other athletes were notified by brand partners that budget allocations were being reviewed. Tournament sponsors began to respond to suggestions for rejuvenation in a more reserved manner. The revenue generated by women's tennis was not going away. It focused on approaching a single, clear center of cultural gravity. And that point had a name. That point had a backhand that could interfere with discussions. And that was just the start. Pose this question to yourself. When was the last time a teenager dramatically changed the way multi-billion-dollar organizations approached sports marketing? Because it had already reached that location. There is a method for numbers to leave rooms. They were never supposed to go. The numbers that were being mentioned in secret discussions regarding Alex Eala's individual sponsorship portfolio were not small endorsement deals. These weren't mid-tier setups, which are usually secured by professional tennis players outside of the top 10. What was revealed in confidential term sheets in preliminary agreements represented a kind of financial commitment that put a player still rising through the ranks in commercial negotiations usually reserved for seasoned Grand Slam champions. Sports business reports state that each brand offers statistics that, when added together over multiple collaborations, produced a total portfolio value estimated in billions rather than millions when projected over multi-year commitments. One of the leading candidates was reportedly a telecom behemoth with substantial market share in Southeast Asia. A number of sportswear firms that interpreted the cultural imprint controlled throughout a large and expanding customer demographic initiated significant conversations. Tech businesses seeking authentic ambassador voices in developing fields saw her as crucial. These offers were special not only because of their size, but also because of the way they were structured. Instead of reaching out to a team to see how she might fit into the existing frameworks for WTA neighboring partnerships, brands were creating completely custom arrangements, creative collaborations, ownership stakes, sponsored content initiatives, and long-term ambassador structures that saw her as a media entity speaking to industry publications rather than just an athletic endorsement. The issue was described with shocking openness by one sports marketing analyst. In order to connect emotionally with the audience, brands have decided that it is more effective to walk around the tour rather than through it. The WTA's formal partnership infrastructure was helpful for reaching large tennis audiences, but it couldn't deliver the same deeply committed, culturally distinct groups that followed you individually. The WTA suffered severe financial consequences as a result of this information. When companies transfer sponsorship revenue from organizational partnerships to individual athlete agreements outside of tour facilities, the collective loses influence. Other players lose visibility, and lesser events lose revenue streams. The environment as a whole is burdened. This is what really increased the level of tension. She wasn't portraying herself as an enemy of any group, and this event wasn't staged. Her representation was just meeting exceptional market demand by employing the appropriate business strategy. That's business, not a revolt. But the WTA fines were the same regardless of the cause. Behind closed doors, tour executives were engaged in contentious discussions. How does an organization maintain sponsorship relevance when one of its members becomes a more appealing individual investment than the group platform? How may commercial structures created for a pre-social media context be rearranged to fit an athlete whose personal audience surpasses institutional reach? These were no longer speculative strategic inquiries. They needed answers immediately, and the WTA seemed to be searching for them far too slowly for reasons that will eventually come to light. The crucial question wasn't whether you were deserving of these offers. That was not actually questioned. Much more unsettling was the question that was being discussed in tennis boardrooms. If the WTA had already lost the commercial narrative, could they ever fully recover it? Silence is never truly quiet during a systemic disaster. It is used to communicate everything. While marketing discussions about Alex Eala grew more intense and sports business media began to formally link the dots, the WTA's official communication channel remained noticeably mute. An organization's incapacity to control its own narrative not only creates a void in the modern media landscape, but it also gives everyone else the microphone. The WTA left an interpretive gap that rival sports organizations, tennis journalists, sports marketing analysts, and fan communities across several continents hurried to fill. There was only institutional inaction at the precise moment when decisive action was most needed. There was no official admission, no strategic positioning statement, and no clear attempt to recast the commercial discussion on their terms. It was terrible to remain silent. Without them, an unpleasant tale was being told. It depicted a governing body totally unprepared for a shift that, in retrospect, had been noticed for years. There were intricate structural elements at play in this delayed reaction. The WTA concurrently balances the competing interests of players, competitions, broadcasters, and respectable business partners while operating across several nations. Because deliberateness indicates accountability governance, decisions within that framework typically proceed in a deliberate manner. From the circumstances underlying IA's commercial boom were everything from normal. Speed wasn't coming and adaptation was essential. In the meantime, individual sponsors began in-depth discussions that would have been unimaginable months before as they grew suspicious of the WTA's strategic stance. After years of maintaining steady, profitable tour agreements, marketers were now raising fundamental concerns about return on investment. WTA-adjacent positions continued to reach the consumers that brands most needed? Or had those viewers completely abandoned institutional channels in search of certain sportsmen, special cultural moments, or unique experiences? The internal reactions those brands were receiving really displeased the tour leadership. Digital analytics cannot be compromised. Audience migration data ignores past relationships, and the overwhelming finding for multiple independent commercial surveys was consistent. Reaching some high-value audiences has become much more difficult for the WTA. While ISA's separate platforms had simultaneously today, players throughout the tour beginning feeling the downstream repercussions. Discussions with possible individual sponsors were moving further. Brand representatives were either presenting WTA partnership alignment with qualifications that had not previously been regarded as a favorable indication, or they were citing it less frequently. The institutional backing that had previously raised each player's market value was starting to lose some of its appeal. Experienced athletes expressed their genuine displeasure in a covert interview with sports journalists. They have devoted their entire lives to improving the WTA's commercial reputation. For many, the idea that institutional silence during a critical transition phase might destroy years of teamwork felt like a major leadership failure that was still going unaddressed. The WTA's poor communication wasn't merely a